You have to constantly remind yourself to be who you are, to be yourself. One thing that I've always found out is that authenticity attracts people, and it attracts those people who you are supposed to come in contact with. It helps to have somebody that genuinely loves you and supports you. And it may not be the person that you think it should be. It may not be family. It may be somebody that you come in contact at a coffee shop and just gives you that word to make you think, yeah, I can do that.
Welcome to the Zami Nobla National Organization of Black Lesbians on Aging podcast. We are your sound source for Black lesbian herstory. I'm your host, Angela Denise Davis. Have you ever wanted to pick up and live abroad? Well, today we talk to Joi and Jane, who tell us about their experience living abroad in the UK and Korea.
Hi, I'm Joi Mitchell, and I show up in the world as a African-American professional lesbian who happens to be a doctor.
My name is Jane Mitchell, and I show up in the world as, I believe, as an intercessor. And that means being intuitive to other people, being sensitive and compassionate towards those that are misunderstood by the majority.
Wonderful. We are so glad you are here in Atlanta for this recording of the Zami Nobla podcast on this beautiful rainy afternoon in Georgia, where you are taking a break from your whirlwind tour, literally, of visiting the States because you live in the UK and you've come home to visit. This is a great episode for us because one of the things we've been wanting to talk about is Black lesbians who travel, Black lesbians who live abroad, and how more women who are interested in doing that can get their feet wet, so to speak. So tell us a little bit about where you currently live now and where you grew up.
Well, we currently live in the UK in a little town called Bury St. Edmunds. We love where we live. We have a beautiful home, and the people have just really been very kind and cordial to us. And one thing that I would say that if I did have a complaint about the UK, it would be the food, which we always say. Other than saying that it's terrible, I really have no other way to describe it, but it really is. And which has made me improve my cooking skills greatly.
Okay. And Jane, where did you grow up?
I grew up in Murfreesboro, Tennessee.
Okay.
It's a little town in between Chattanooga and Nashville. Grew up as a preacher's kid. My father, three of my sisters, my brother, and one of my nieces are all in ministry. So I grew up in the good old Southern Baptist church.
Joi, where did you grow up?
I grew up in Detroit, Michigan, and in the inner city. Left Detroit to attend college. First person in my family to attend college. And went to Morris Brown College in Atlanta, Georgia, which is how I arrived here. Stayed here for about 24 years. Got my bachelor's in psychology at Morris Brown. Got my master's from Clark Atlanta University. So
how did two beautiful Black lesbians from Tennessee and Michigan end up in the UK and all points in between? What was your journey like? For me,
I am the sixth of 7 children. And all of my family, with the exception of my 2 brothers, still live in the same town. And I left. I went to Memphis State University for 2 years, and then I left, came back home, and decided that was not the place for me. I didn't want to be there. And I decided to join the Army. And I stayed in the Army for about 5.5, 6 years, which is how I ended up in South Carolina. That was my last duty station. While I was there, I had a child. She's 22 now. During my time there, in the beginning, I actually didn't travel anywhere outside of, the States. And actually, I never really thought about it. I was married for 7 years, and I got divorced. And it was a time where I just needed to do something for myself. And I don't even really remember how Aruba came upon my timeline or my memory, but it was just someplace that when I looked at the pictures, I was like, I want to go there. It's so beautiful. Surprisingly to other people and to myself, I went by myself. I'll never forget. It was September 2008, I believe, and it was a Labor Day weekend. And it was probably the beginning of opening my eyes to wanting to see other places. Not really until I met Joi that I really met someone who wanted to travel or who even thought about it, because obviously I already had my passport. Mm-hmm. But not until I met Joi, and at that time I had been working for the Postal Service for about 18 years, which including my military service, that was about 24 years working for the government. So we met in 2012, and she was telling me all these places that she had gone, and just really giving me a different perspective of the world. Mm-hmm. So we got married in 2015. She had gone to Germany to work. And I was, we were like, we don't want this. We don't want to be apart, and just see each other in the summertime. So the next year, that was my 18th year at the post office, I decided that was my last year. And people were like, are you crazy? You just got to up and leave? Yes, I am. And it's been great ever since. I moved to Korea in December of 2016. We stayed there for 3 years, and it's just been a whirlwind since that time. Just been able to experience the joy of other cultures.
Mm-hmm. So, Joi, how did you all meet?
We met on it wasn't a dating site per se.
No.
It was a site for Black lesbians who were just meeting and who had a love for music and poetry. And we met like in 2012 and just became friends. And we would say, hey, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Happy Valentine's Day. And we would just speak during on holidays. And then in 2013, I reached out and said, hey, I'm just checking in. Hadn't heard from you in a while. I was in D.C. on a conference. At that time, I was working for Bethune-Cookman University as the director of counseling services. So I was living in right outside Daytona Beach, Florida. And she was in Columbia. And so we just started conversing and talking, and one thing led to the next. And we commuted. So we started dating, and we commuted for a whole year. From going on the weekends to, Columbia, or her coming to Daytona Beach. We did that for a year. And then it was like, okay, this is a lot of driving. Mm-hmm. And so eventually I moved to Columbia. Started looking for a job. It was really hard. So I had been a ASACS counselor, which is an adult substance abuse counselor, as a contractor working with the Department of Defense in 2005. And I was stationed in Hanau, Germany. And loved it, and always wanted to go back. I always wanted to return overseas. I tell people, when you visit, it's one thing. When you live in a different country, it's a totally different experience. And so I had always wanted to go back, So I talked to a friend who was working as a marriage family life counselor with the military life family counselor. I'm sorry, I said it wrong. However, got a job, a contract job, short one, in Vilseck, Germany. By this time I was in Columbia. We were living together and everything. And I said, I really want to go. And she was like, well, go, so you can come visit, But it was a short time. Went, and the bug started again. It started again. And I was like, I don't want to come back to the States. And so what happened was I then put in for another contract. And it happened to be in South Korea. So this time I was in South Korea, and I would be there a whole school year. So from August to the middle of June. That was a different ballgame now, from 4 months to a whole school year. And she was like, I said, well, you can come visit. I'll come home, because they send us home for Christmas. And then I would come home for the summer, and then she would come in between that time. So we did that, and it was really hard. But while I was there, I was talking to a school counselor who worked directly for the Department of Defense, not as a contractor. And I was like, well, what are my chances of being a school counselor? How do I get the certificate added on to, I'm an LPC, a licensed professional counselor. She said, oh, you can do that, and I had a Ph.D. And it's like, oh, you just do this, and Georgia will certify you. Then you get certified to the Department of Defense schools. And I did it. So what happened was, because of my work ethics and all the things that I had done while I was a contractor, the principals and the assistant principal wrote a letter of recommendation for me. Then I had to go home for the summer, and I was hired from the States. So when you get hired from the States, then they will send you back and ship all your things and your family.
Wow.
And so when I told her, she was like, okay. She was like, okay. I was like, really? She was like, yeah, okay. And so I had to come in August. She did not come to South Korea until December, because we're closing down the house and getting everything shipped. Then we had to get the dogs, all situated. So it was really a process.
Wow.
But we got to Korea, loved it.
Wow.
Love Korea. I mean, I can't say that enough. The culture, the people embrace you. It's extremely safe. We have in the States so many misconceptions about living in another country, especially being an African American, being an African American lesbian, being a woman. We have a lot of misconceptions about safety and how well do they receive Black people, and it's really a misconception. I mean, of course, you have a lot of Koreans who would stare, but they were mostly staring at not just at our complexion, amazed by our dark skin, or amazed by our hair. Because if you go outside of the base, maybe into the smaller rural, areas of Korea, they have not seen many African American people, only on TV. Now, if you're closer to the base, where they're used to seeing African American soldiers and their families and their children, it's a little bit different. How they receive you is different. But when you go out to the real areas, they're like, wow, amazed. But living in Korea afforded us to really travel.
What was the one thing that surprised you most about Korea, Joi?
Oh, my goodness. The food. But not just the food. You have never had fried chicken, real fried chicken, until you have some Korean fried chicken. And nobody believes me, but when you go there, it is amazing. The seasoning, how they prepare the food. Everything was very fresh. You know how here in America, when you go to fast food, it's sitting on their lamp? Not in Korea. Even in fast food places, you have to wait. It is made to order. So the freshness of food, like fried chicken, and the different variety of foods. You could eat something different every day in a year, just something totally different. It was just a lot of things. How they welcome you, how they welcome you. We had a real estate agent who helped us located our house. Above and beyond. Always. Let's go to lunch. Let me explain about the house. Just very welcoming and sincere. And the follow-up after you move in the house to make sure that you are okay. If there are any problems, do you have any concerns? And that was very different from living in the States. So really appreciated that. And the other thing was the ability to travel easily. Short distance, to travel to the Philippines, very inexpensive, to go to Vietnam, to go to Thailand, and to experience a different culture, and then being able to compare the cultures from from Thailand to Vietnam to Philippines to South Korea, to compare those cultures was amazing. Because one of the things we do when we travel is to see the cultural sites, see the historical sites. We always go to the night market to try the street food or sample the food, and we can compare now because we have something to compare to. You know, so Asia was really, I mean, maybe because that was our first duty station, long-term duty station, but we had a sense of community there, you know, a sense of comfort, and we miss Korea. We miss Korea.
Were there any difficulties for you being as a couple, or was that just not kind of known?
Oh no, it was really known. Like, it was known across the board. It was known that I'm married to a woman at my job, on base, because I started the first Gay Straight Alliance at my school when I was the contractor. So it was known, and they were just waiting to see, oh, we want to see your wife. You know, like she didn't exist. It was like, yeah, she's coming in December. So they knew.
Were you in a high school situation, or?
The first year I was in middle high school.
Okay.
The next year it became just a high school.
Okay.
And so for the remaining 2 years I was in a high school situation. But people knew, you know, when we go to the grocery store, and everybody knew. You know, but in Korea it was never an issue. It was never an issue. What was more of an issue was weight. That is the issue.
Talk about that.
Yeah. They are not used to seeing large people. I'll tell you a joke. Well, it was a funny experience. I went to the doctor, which they are very efficient when it comes to x-rays or, you know, any type of medical. And so, you know how you get a gown. So they gave me this little gown, and I was trying. Now, I don't speak Korean, you know, so I'm trying to do like sign language and explain to them it's too little. And they say, no, it's biggie size. And I say, no, it's still too little. No, you try. I could get one arm in. And I was like, okay, this is not going to work because I have to have like an ultrasound. And so I was thinking, okay, I saw a guy coming on the gurney with a sheet. So I pointed, sheet, need one. Sheet, please. And I say, oh, a sheet. I was just doing everything because they are not used to larger people, period. Not just weight, height, or anything.
Interesting.
So everything is pretty small. So that was the biggest difficulty that I experienced. And even kids would stop and stare and be like, oh, in amazement. Oh, you know, because they had not.
But, you know, and it's interesting because you're not very tall. No. You're not large. But I guess it's all relative in terms of...
They considered Jane to be obese.
And Jane is fit.
Yes.
Fit and fabulous. And so I would probably have some issues in Korea.
So can you imagine what they considered me?
Yeah. Wow. Interesting.
And I really just did not, you know, just let that get to me.
Yes.
Because people on the street would be like, oh, staring. And I'm like, I just say, 안녕하세요, 네. And then they kind of be embarrassed. They say, 안녕하세요. And they, you know, bow back. Yes. Hi.
Oh, hi. Okay.
Yeah. It's like, okay, stop staring, you know? And then when you do that, they're like, oh, okay. You know, so that was the biggest issue. But as far as sexuality, the complexion of our skin, and at that time, both of us had very short hair. So that was another thing that drew attention to us. Wherever we go, that drew attention to us. They never forget us. When we went to Thailand, they say, Joi and Jane. Because they don't forget the dark skin, short hair, because they don't see a lot of people that look like us.
Right, exactly. So you were being a school counselor there, Joi. And Jane, what were you doing in Korea?
That's when I started doing the personal training. I got certified, went through that, took the test and everything, because that is something really that I've always been interested in. And so I told Joi that she was asking me, did I want to work for the post office when I got over there? I'm like, no. I might as well stay here if that's what I'm going to do. Because honestly, I was really unhappy there anyway. And I wanted to do something differently. So that's when I decided that was really going to be, you know, my focus and what I was going to do. And a lot of my clients were actually people who worked with her, other teachers. And we managed to really build a good studio in the home, have all kinds of equipment and stuff. And I think that for people who don't like to go to the gym, it was really a welcome experience. And to have that one-on-one and not just really give a prescription and exercises, but really kind of getting to know people, you know, and because I'm more of a one-on-one kind of person versus a group of people. I'm quiet anyway, but when I get in a group of people, I'm really quiet. You won't know that I'm there, but one-on-one, I'm kind of different, and really just able to kind of dive into why you're here. You know, I know you want me to give you some exercises, but why you're really here. And that really has been, I mean, it's really been a kind of a phenomenal experience for me, because that is really, if you want to say, my ministry. It's something that sometimes I run away from because when things sometimes start getting too deep, you know, but one thing that I do realize is that is really who I am, and I don't have to work at that. People just open up to me. And so it's really been a great experience. Even in the UK, I'm still continuing to do it, and really kind of expanding what Fit for Life by Jane means. As I told you before, my motto is live authentically, love freely, and move often. And what that means is that wellness encapsulates a variety of things, and you have to define what that means to you. If it means being a bodybuilder, if it means traveling the world, if it means loving who you want to love, if it means being in a job that you love and quitting a job that you hate, it means living life on your own terms. Every day is about improving. Every day is about looking in the mirror and saying, I like what I see. And if I don't, I have the choice to change it. And if I don't want to, and I'm not ready to now, guess what? That's okay too. And so I try to meet people where they are.
Well, it seems like you found your calling in Korea.
I did.
That's amazing to go halfway across the world in this new space, in this new place, and find out work that you love doing.
Yeah. Sometimes you're on a course and you think that is the thing that you're supposed to be doing. And I found out that it wasn't. It took me a while to really get through some hurt and some anger and just accept that maybe I'm supposed to be doing something outside of four walls. You know?
A lot of people are afraid of doing what you two have done. On the one hand, it's moving internationally, moving abroad to a place you don't even know the language or the culture. It's also moving out of vocational spaces where you're unhappy to find yourself doing the work that you love. How today would you speak to someone who says, I want to do all that and more, but I'll start by moving abroad. You know, I'll start by really thinking about living in a place outside of the United States. How can people begin to process that?
One of the things is that once we get our designated station that we're going to be at, I start to research. And I'm researching this specific area. I'm researching the culture, the language. I'm looking on YouTube, because what happens is that decreases the anxiety about moving, because now you have you're kind of familiar with what to expect, what to look for. You're preparing yourself for the process. Now, when you get there, of course, things are going to happen and you didn't, plan for. But however, you have a decreased sense of anxiety about the move and the language. The other thing I tell people, guess what? If you don't like it, you can move back. You are never stuck. Mm-hmm. You are only stuck if you you decide in your spirit, I'm stuck. You can always go back. But you have to at least try and see. And if that's like, some people just don't want to up and move, go visit. Take several vacations. Visit the exact place where you want to go, so you can see and learn some of the language and learn the people. And then you can decide, is this the place for me? Do I really want to be here? But you've got to do more than look at YouTube channels. You've got to put some motion behind those thoughts and some action behind those thoughts and decide, why do I want to go here? what is my purpose for going there? What do I hope to gain? What do I hope to learn? How will I survive? Or how will I work? What do I want to do there? And then what happens a lot of times is that you have this plan. Mm-hmm. And then family might jump in and say, why are you going way over there? You don't know nobody. You don't know the language. And what happens is that they can throw your focus off. They can throw your focus off because they present self-doubt. And you're thinking, yeah, I really don't know the language. And what about the money? And what if I don't get a job? But you have the ability to put all that in motion prior to getting on that plane. You have the ability to set those things in motion. And it's just about planning and researching. And what people don't realize, there are many jobs overseas that don't require the same certifications that we have in the States. There's teaching English, there's working for the Department of Defense, there's working for the government with the Department of Defense. They're working in the colleges at the university. And because the cost of living is so much cheaper, like in a lot of the Asian states, Asian countries, the money that you would have to make in the States, you won't need to have that amount to live comfortably there. Mm-hmm. And so those are the things you need to research and close out the noise that says, oh, I wouldn't do that. You don't know nobody there. Close out all of that. Because it's like I tell my students, this is your journey. Mm-hmm. The people before you and the people after you will have their own individual journey. This is your journey. You never know until you try. And people who really like to travel and who have lived abroad, your mindset takes the ultimate shift. It shifts because now you know so many things, and all these misconceptions that we've been taught in the States or growing up or from family members or even in school are not true. And you see it and you feel it for yourself. And traveling just really opens up your eyes to so many things which allow you to say, I want to try a new adventure. Like I always say, okay, Joi and Jane's great adventures, because, of course, mishaps are going to happen, but we've learned how to roll with it and prepare the best way we can, But traveling changes your mindset. And people say, well, I don't want to go overseas that quick. Well, start close, Some people don't even go out of their state. We went to Canada, loved Canada, went to Montreal, went to different parts of Canada. Just start. That is the key, to just start. The other thing I want to say is that people get caught up, it's too expensive. People will buy a car, people plan to do whatever, Mm-hmm. You spend money frivolously all the time. And what you don't realize that when you're talking about traveling overseas, you have to have the ability to really plan. If it means paying things in steps, pay it in steps. Pay the plane ticket, one, paycheck. Next time, pay the hotel. And then you don't have that anxiety or that stress about, am I going to have enough money to pay it all at once? You don't have to. Mm-hmm. It's the ability to plan to go where you want to go and see the world. We went to Cambodia last summer. When I tell you, that's a different type of hot. It was so hot, but it was so beautiful and peaceful and calm and welcoming. The food was good. And we went to see all the ruins, and it was amazing. Just to say that, one of the things I like to do is when I watch the Travel Channel, I can look at TV and say, we've been there. Mm-hmm. I didn't see it on TV. Mm-hmm. I've been there and I stood there. That is amazing to me. And that fuels my energy to say, okay, where are we going next? Mm-hmm. Last year, I have a whole year our plan. We're going to go this for Christmas. This is for Easter. And because you live overseas, the ability to travel to those small places is very inexpensive. Like from South Korea to go to Thailand, you can get a ticket for $250 round trip. So I want to say when people travel, sometimes they just travel to one place. They just say, I'm going to go to Korea. However, because you may not get on that side again soon, It is better to say, I'm going to go to Korea, stay 3 days, pay that money, because it's much cheaper to go from Korea to Thailand or Cambodia or the Philippines, or Taiwan. You're right there. Mm-hmm. So when you start to plan and you want to see maybe different parts of Asia, don't just look at one country, because people think, I don't have enough time. But you do, because the flights are maybe an hour, 2-hour flight, very inexpensive. And you may not have an option again.
So we've talked about getting to a different country. Now let's talk a little bit about living in a different country. And let's do an age check, because I think it's important. A lot of people say, well, I can do this maybe in my 20s. This is when I should travel. I could do hostels, or I could live abroad in my early 30s. But you all are how old?
I'm 48.
That's Jane.
And I'm 53.
53. And you're living abroad.
Yes.
And loving it.
Yes.
Love it.
What is life like for you there in the UK? How is it different in terms of just the way in which you move in the world and the culture and the space?
In the UK, actually, it's somewhat a lot like living in the States. And I say that because they're just as westernized as America. Yet some of the differences are, of course, some of the words that they use. And one of the interesting things about living there is trying to navigate their British slang, so to speak. They call certain things, like we say line, they say queue, or we say to go, they say take away. It's just, different words that they use. And then you'll find that some of them speak so fast, it's like listening to another language. But living there, it's really been, it's not a place that I would just want to live for a long time.
And you all have been there for how long now?
We've been there it'll be a year in August.
Okay. So you moved from South Korea to the UK?
The weather is fine. It rains a lot. The people are a little bit different in the sense that they are just they're very nice people, very, very nice people, until they're driving. Now that's when they get mean. But but other than that, I have no problem with the people. And the one thing that I will say, not necessarily about where we live in a town called Bury St. Edmunds. But when you go to London, you will see so many different types of people. People from India, people from Korea, people from China, people from other parts of Europe. And sometimes you won't even know it until they start speaking. Because, and I've told Joi this a couple of times, it's very rare that you hear people speak English. You hear all of these side conversations and it's in, their native tongue. And I think that is one of the things that I see from the British people that they kind of get upset about, is that kind of like here, they feel like they're losing their culture. But it's amazing to me just to be where you're not the minority or the majority. You're just a part of this complex culture of people. And we've never, as far as I can remember, we've never experienced any type of negative behavior or anything, because everybody's different. And even in our little town, the one thing that I can say is that people probably know us because we're probably the only two Black women who live there.
And how far are you from London?
We're about maybe 2 hours by train.
Okay.
Yeah. And but even the little sleepy town that we live in, we love it because we go to the markets and eat their street food, and the people are really great, and they want to know where we're from and what brought us here, and because they just don't see, there's just not a lot of people like us, Black Americans. There are some Caribbeans and Africans who live there, but even they are few and far between. And the interesting thing for me personally was when I was in Korea, Joi was like, well, why don't you let the Koreans cut your hair? I'm like, no. Nobody's cut my hair. But, I let them cut it and everything was fine.
Okay.
And that's, one thing about Koreans that I will say that really, you asked that question earlier, that shocked me was that when I tell you they can mimic when they can copy anything, I mean, I would never believe that they could cut my hair. I mean, not just me as an African American person, but I had absolutely no problems. Now, coming to the UK, it's a little bit different in that I had someone cut my hair because my plan was to grow it out, and then the water's so hard over there that it felt like a Brillo pad. So I was like, let me get this cut off. So the guy, he cut it. Fine. He cut it again. My line was going north and south. Okay. It was not a good situation. But sometimes it's just those little things that can sort of make or break you, so to speak, in an area, because you really do have to adjust to those kinds of cultural things that may not be available to you.
And you have close cropped hair, just for our listeners, just so they can be clear. And you had a Korean barber for all the time you were in Korea?
Yes. Yeah, a female the whole time. And when I got to the UK, it was actually I think he is from Trinidad. And I think he had some cultural misgivings about a woman cutting her hair. And so when he cut it off, I'm not going to say he did it on purpose, but let's just say I did not go back to him.
Okay. Well, that's a very interesting take on culture and just the way in which you found what you needed in South Korea and not in the UK. So was there a big culture shift from moving from South Korea to the UK? Maybe that's where the biggest change
I think,
was.
For me, that was the biggest shift for me, was the cultural shock, so to speak. Because when I tell you that the culture in Korea, I mean, they are so hospitable and so detail-oriented, and they care about how they present themselves. They care about how they present whatever the service is to you. And it's not that the people in the UK don't care, but Koreans seem to take it to another level because they want your business. They want you to, they are proud of who they are as a people, and they are proud of what they do. And it shows in, just as simple as a haircut. As Joi would get some of her clothes made, and they pay attention to detail, even just from being there, welcoming us into the house and making sure we had everything that we needed. The culture shock when we came to the UK was like 360 degrees to the opposite. They basically just said, okay, you in that house, you're on your own. And we had to call and say, well, how do you work the thermostat? And you would think you just turned it on and put it to the temperature that you wanted, but we had to have somebody come over there and do it, because it's not as simple as we thought it was. But just welcoming you and saying, let me help you out, let me show you how we do things, and that wasn't there. You just, like I said, basically you were just kind of on your own. As long as you pay that money on time and you do what you're supposed to do, then you're all right. We don't need to talk to you.
Okay. Well, it's really fascinating, this conversation, because I think so many people, some people would think about relationships between Koreans and African Americans in this country. And a lot of the difficulties and the way in which we've seen those relationships displayed in the media. And they've not been very friendly towards both parties. So it's interesting hearing you talk about actually going to South Korea and just the reception, the hospitality, and just being in that place and how welcoming and warm it was to you.
Yes, it was. And I can only think of 2 instances where it was different. And that was when, I don't know if you remember, but when we had gone to we were at the hospital and we had gone to the bathroom, and there was an older lady waiting to come in. When I came out of the stall, It was her turn to go in, but she looked at who was coming out of the stall and she didn't go into the bathroom. She waited until another Korean person came out. And there was another time we were at the hospital again. It was an older gentleman. We sat next to him and then he got up and moved. But those two small instances, I will not say that everybody in Korea is like that, because that could have just as well happened here in America. But overall, the experience there was, extremely positive. If I could just immerse myself into that culture and speak the language, I would live there. Korea, to me, is one of those places where there's something for everybody. When you make a lot of money or you don't make a lot of money, you can really just be enriched by the culture. Because they put a lot of emphasis on family and food and togetherness. And that's something that I just really connected with. And it probably may have had something to do with the fact that I grew up in a large family. But I really connected with that aspect of it.
That's beautiful. So I guess the other question I have for you is, being in the UK and then looking back to the United States and all of the interesting situations we have going on here now, the hatred, the rigidness, the dehumanization that we're seeing in this country towards immigrants, towards people who are different, and the rearing of its ugly head that's always been the racism and sexism in our country. When you look back at the United States and you see what's going on in our country, and you're looking at it from afar, what are some of your thoughts?
I am just in total disbelief. I'm just like, this is so sad to me. It makes me have a real sense of sadness. Like, how are we going backwards? How are we going backwards? And as you say in reference to the UK is going through a very similar experience in reference to, as Jane mentioned, about wanting to get all the immigrants out. They want them to return back to their homeland. And so we're seeing it on their news as well, saying that, we don't want you here. And then they have Brexit going up, but they also have this little piece about that rears its ugly head. That's racism. And it's really towards mainly the Caribbean immigrants who came. And it's awful. It is very, very similar to what we're seeing in the States. So when we're watching TV, it's like, wow, like, this is really happening. Like, I'm just in disbelief sometimes. Like, again, another news story comes out, I'm like, I just, it just gets so far-fetched to me. That this is the country that I lived in. This is the country of my birth. And this is what's happening. And so, because I watch the news more than Jane. Jane's like, okay, I'm done with it. I'm done with it. But I'm just trying to keep abreast of what's happening, to see what's going on next. What's going on now? What's next? But in the UK, they have their own things that are really shaking it up. And they're very fearful of what Brexit is going to bring, or if it's going to come. And what does that mean?
Right.
Because it's going to touch near and far. And so you have a lot of the Brits really worried about, okay, what's going to happen? And so that you feel that tension in the air. You feel that tension about what's going to happen, and who is it going to directly affect, and how long, and what does this mean? So we feel that, but we are, because we're new. So we're just trying to figure, okay, what does this mean when they say Brexit? What is that? So we have to really kind of like research it to figure, okay, and how does it going to affect us?
Right.
And it will affect us in reference to travel, how expensive things can, get. It will change financially. Because like right now, the dollar is only worth like 75 cents. So for us, that's another thing that's different from the UK and Korea. You see? So when we're purchasing things, it's much more expensive. It's much more expensive. The UK reminds me a lot of New York. Well, London, the London area is a lot like New York. Really busy, a lot of stores moving and moving. But it can be really expensive to live there if you are not being paid in pounds. You see? And so if you're an expat and you work on the British economy, then you're paid in pounds. So it may, even things out. But if you are working for the Department of Defense or working for the American government, you're paid in dollars. That's a different story. And so for us, when the economy shifts, they will kind of accommodate us, for the difference in pay. But when Brexit comes, I don't know how that's going to work. Or if it comes, I don't know how that's going to work. And that changes things. So for expats and people who work for the government, all of that is on our mind as well. All that is on our mind as well. But, overall, the UK, we're still adjusting, learning about it. One thing that I will say, they have a dynamic medical system, medical insurance. Because even we're there, we don't have to pay for medical insurance because the taxes pay for it. And when I say it's really easy, you go into the doctors, you get what you need done, and you leave. There's no sign-in papers, and that's a blessing.
Yes.
That's very helpful because you have those other added expenses as well. So not having to worry about medical insurance is really good. And they're pretty consistent with that.
Well, you all have come a long way from Detroit and Murfreesboro.
Yes.
And the world has changed a lot.
Yes,
in the 5 decades or so that you all have been in it. And it's fascinating because I agree. I think travel does changes things. And as we look at our world, the globe is shifting. Global warming, global change. And as things get bigger, they get smaller. Yeah. So I think it's important for those of us who want to travel and see the world to do that in the way it is now, because we don't know what's going to happen in the future, just like you said. Sure. You've been in the UK for a year. What are some of the other places that you want to go or you would like to live?
Places that we talked about was Germany, Italy, Spain. We joked and said Bahrain, but we don't. That's just a far-fetched thing. I don't think we could. That wouldn't be the best choice for us. But I think those 3 are in our top places that we want to live other than where we are now. I think the one question that we get is, are we coming back?
That was my next question.
And Joi vehemently says, no, we're not coming back. But no, we're not coming back unless we have to. And at one time we were talking about retiring in Thailand. And I said, well, that is, that's a little bit too far from, family and our children and stuff. I said, so now we've kind of settled on Hawaii. And that was another place that we had traveled to about 1.5 years ago. And it was like being in another country. I mean, you wouldn't think that this is part of the United States. It was so beautiful there, but
and the culture.
It's just the people are beautiful. The country, the state itself is beautiful. But in terms of living somewhere else, I think those 3, Germany, Italy, and Spain, are where we wouldn't mind living.
One of the questions I usually ask guests is, have we left anything out? Are there some bits of information that you think would be helpful for our listeners to hear as we're talking about traveling and living abroad? And even in the larger sense of finding your calling in the world and doing it wherever you are.
Yeah. I think finding your calling, I don't think it ever ends. I think that it's something that it's an evolution. You may start out at point A, but then find out that there are levels to this thing. And because I don't think that we are just one-dimensional people. And as you find out more about yourself, you find out more about what you're capable of. And I can tell you personally it's fearful sometimes, because you out there taking that step by yourself, so to speak, and you think about what will other people think about what I'm doing. And this has been just a revelation to me, is just that in comparing myself to what other people are doing, and this person is at step M and I may be still at D. But the thing about it is that you have to constantly remind yourself to be who you are, to be yourself. One thing that I've always found out is that authenticity attracts people. And it attracts those people who you are supposed to come in contact with. And I think that's why it's been a kind of a slow process for me, because at one time I did find myself comparing myself to this, that, and the other, and who's doing this and who's doing that. Mm-hmm. But I just have to remind myself, be you. You're good. Be you. And it helps. It helps to have somebody that genuinely loves you and supports you, and that may not be. And it may not be the person that you think it should be. It may not be family. It may be somebody that you come in contact at a coffee shop and just gives you that word to make you like, yeah, I can do that thing. My point is that be honest with yourself about, who you are, what you want, and how you want to get there. There's always something out there to see, always. And if you got to start in your own state, do that. Don't let anybody, as they say, travel shame you. Do that and own that. Yeah, you may have grown up in that little small town, but you don't know anything about its history.
So travel shame is, I've been to Africa and Europe, and where have you been? Oh, you've not been outside of your city.
Right.
I gotcha.
Or in reverse. Oh, so where are you guys going this summer? You see, to make you try to feel kind of like, oh, so, and so that happens a lot. So where are you guys going for Christmas? And so it works kind of like both ways, Mm-hmm. But it's like we've learned to just trust the process, but know that there is a process. Like James said, that there is a process. You do need to research.
Yes.
But trust the process, because things will unfold.
Yes.
But a lot of times people get fearful. Like, for example, I have everything set up and I'm going to move, and then the fear sets in, and then you start backtracking. Trust the process. There will be hiccups, but you will survive. You will survive, and then you'll meet people who have also been through this process that can help you, that can assist you. So that's just real important, and to be your authentic self. That's key.
I've had a wonderful conversation with you all today.
Thank you.
I have my passport, so all I need is your address.
That's right, for sure.
I got new friends in the UK.
For sure.
And like I tell everyone else who have sat in the seats in which you're sitting, thank you for being part of our Black lesbian herstory and for sharing your stories with us today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Joi and Jane, thanks for such a wonderful conversation. We appreciate you sharing your pathway to adventure and all the ways in which we can grab our passport and explore the globe. Thanks for listening to the podcast. If you have any comments or you want to give some feedback, feel free to send us an email or leave your comments and feedback wherever you listen to the podcast. And as always, thanks for listening. Have a sweet one.
Hey.